return to office and embracing of hybrid work culture has certainly begun, and with that comes new challenges for transforming enterprise networks. I'm here with Brandon Butler, Research Manager for Enterprise Networking at IDC, and we're going to discuss how IT can translate some of the lessons learned from remote work to supporting in-person and hybrid workers. Stick around. So, Brandon, thank you so much for coming in once again. We've been talking just about annually about the sort of enterprise networking landscape at large, and I want to harken back to that original video that we did not original, but the one from earlier this year, and talk about what has changed since then. So when we last spoke, we were sort of speaking a little bit hypothetically, I think it was in March of 2021, about the return to office and how to support hybrid workers. But in some parts of the world, certainly here in the US, that has obviously begun. Here we are in person, which is wonderful. So when we first spoke, you introduced this concept of branch of one, the branch of one. Can you quickly go over for me, just quick definition, what that actually means?
Sure. Yeah, and thanks for having me here, Juliet. It's great to be here. So yeah, branch of one has been a key area of research for us at IDC. And by branch of one, we mean how do organizations support enterprise class connectivity to remote workers?
Sure.
And this is something that obviously was born out of the COVID pandemic, where in early 2020, we saw a huge increase in the number of workers who had to work remotely. And it created this challenge of how do organizations really around the globe ensure that those remote workers have good connectivity when they are working either from home or, wherever they need to work from. And so we've seen some really interesting evolutions as we're like almost 2 years into this now. Of sort of what are some lessons that organizations have learned for supporting those remote workers, and what does the sort of future of work look like, and what does the future of connectedness need to look like for enterprises and organizations really all over the globe to, both maintain that enterprise class connectivity for remote workers, but also support workers who may be coming into the office or any other number of places where folks go to work nowadays.
Yeah. And I feel like that's sort of the $1 million question, which is, I would imagine that a lot of enterprises are probably in different stages of adopting or embracing remote work or hybrid work or in-person work. I know some enterprises are saying everyone has to come back, or some enterprises are applying a hybrid model. So what's sort of the general consensus, I guess, among enterprises, and where are they in those stages of planning to support in-person workers, let's say?
Yeah, and we've done a number of studies on this, so I can provide some survey data that we have. And I can tell you, we asked U.S. respondents to a survey about what percent of your workforce is going to be working remotely. And so we asked, what did that look like pre-COVID? And it was less than 5% of workers were working remotely. In July of 2021, over the summer, that number had increased to 44%.
That still feels so low to me.
Well, and you think about that, there are workers who are working in a number of different places. There's even before the pandemic, there were folks who are working in an office. There were some remote workers. There are also folks who work in things like education centers at colleges and universities, in warehouses. And then you have what we call field workers, folks, delivery drivers or maintenance workers or outside salespeople who of work out in the field all the time. So we have thought about sort of that remote work specific portion. Again, that jumped from about 5% up to 44% in the pandemic. And then we asked, in your future, we called it your desired steady state. So, because no one really knows when post-pandemic will be. So in what we call your steady state of the future, what do you expect that level of remote workers to be? And it was about 20%.
Wow.
So we're going from 5% up to 44%. And we think that enterprises are going to be supporting about a fifth of their workers working remotely into the future. And that's why some of these branch of one architectures, we believe, are going to continue to be important into the future too.
So when you talk about, I guess, remote work in that way, is that saying, someone is working from home exclusively 5 days a week, or does that account for any sort of hybrid model?
Yeah, I think for both. It would account for folks who are working remotely all the time, but some of these branch of one architectures, the need to support enterprise class connectivity and securely provide that connectivity. You need to do that for workers who are working remotely all the time, or even workers who are working remotely part of the time.
Sure. So, what stage would you say that enterprises are in of this, like I said in the intro, transformation, right?
Sure.
And yeah, where is there to go? I guess because my mindset, what I'm thinking is, people have been working from home exclusively in some cases for, 44% in July in July 2021, you've got people working remotely over a year. So I would imagine that obviously in that time, IT has learned a lot of lessons. So are they ready to apply the lessons? What are the lessons?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a really interesting time in the networking industry now because we have this branch of one that we talk about in supporting remote workers. We also see a lot of investments in office networking technology as well, which we can talk about. But yeah, in terms of some of the lessons that we've seen learned for these branch of one architectures, I would say that there's not a one size fits all approach to supporting
of course,
enterprise connectivity for remote workers. Some remote workers might just need a higher bandwidth internet connection to their home. They need some extra bandwidth to be able to ensure that they have the right bandwidth to be able to do their jobs. Some organizations have rolled out extra VPN capacity to make sure that they have secure connectivity for those remote workers. I would say that in the majority of cases, that has been sort of good enough for a lot of organizations. But I think what we're seeing now, specifically at the end of 2021 and looking forward to next year, is that organizations are thinking about what sort of plans do I want to put in place to sort of codify this enterprise class connectivity to remote workers? Because this isn't going away. No. I think a lot of organizations are thinking now that, I am going to have a higher percentage of workers who are going to be working remotely, into the foreseeable future. If you think about attracting and retaining talent, that's an important part
Huge perk.
Right, of being able to work from home. So from that perspective, if you're a networking pro within an organization, you need to think about this business, my business needs to be able to support these remote workers. And so what does that look like? So we've seen a number of different networking technologies that organizations can use. In some cases, you can deploy an access point to a remote worker. So that would give them a Wi-Fi network. That's the same Wi-Fi network that they would have when they're in the office.
Sure.
And that has a number of security advantages to it. It
I would
provides
imagine
a different Wi-Fi network than what your kids are streaming Netflix on, for example.
Yeah.
And so that gives some advantages, and we've seen that for what I would call sort of knowledge workers who are using internet connections, for their day-to-day tasks for their jobs. I would say there's another class of workers. You can think of like call center workers who need enterprise class connectivity all the time because it's really critical for their jobs, or executives maybe in healthcare, some remote doctors, in finance, some remote traders. These are types of jobs where you want an even higher level of connectivity, and you maybe want some security.
Yeah, absolutely. You want
well.
Security.
Right. And so that's where we're seeing some technologies like SD-WAN gateways being deployed, even some cellular backup connectivity. So you're not just relying on that broadband connectivity, but you have a cellular backup, either LTE or in the future 5G. And then maybe some security components that are delivered as well, maybe a next generation firewall or some sort of hardened security device. And so I think it's important for folks to think about these sort of different classes of the remote workers that they have and what sort of solutions would be important for, those specific types of workers. And I would just say that this is something that folks should think about, going forward, because this issue, it's not going away, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is the new normal that we're in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who hasn't stopped talking about the new normal?
Right.
So one quick question for you is, you obviously mentioned, a number of new enterprise networking technology that networking pros can implement. What sort of things, or what, if any, of these technologies are carried over from, let's say, July of 2021?
Sure. Yeah, no, and we've seen a number of them. I would say, last year in 2020, there were a lot of Band-Aid solutions that were sort of put in.
Yeah.
Organizations, because you had that huge increase from 5% up to almost half of your workers working remotely, you had to put in some solutions pretty quickly here. And so now I think we're at a point where folks are thinking about, what does my long-term plan need to be for supporting these remote workers? Maybe I do need to put out and deliver some access points to provide Wi-Fi for some workers.
Sure.
Maybe for some of my workers, I do need a more hardened SD-WAN gateway to be able to provide direct access to cloud-based applications. So yeah, I think we are starting to see these sort of more fortified plans in place for supporting these remote workers. But then at the same time, we're also seeing a number of investments in networking technology for the office spaces as well, because we're going to start to see more folks coming back to the office as well. So it's really an interesting time in networking when you think about supporting those remote workers, while at the same time there are a number of new technologies for those in-office workers as well.
Yeah, and maybe sort of leaving whatever those Band-Aid solutions, like you said, or imperfect solutions that IT was. I mean, I'm sure it was very important, obviously, to put these solutions into place when everyone first had to work from home, but making something that's a little bit more calculated perhaps and a little bit more intentional.
Yeah, and something that can last for the next, 3 to 5 years. If this is something that your organization is going to be supporting into the future, then you want something that you've actually thought about in a sort of thoughtful way of putting into place that will work for your organization into the future. I think now is a good time to start thinking about those.
And before we move on, I do want to talk briefly. I mean, you did mention a lot of sort of solutions that include security and making sure that everyone has secure connections. But I want to talk a little bit about SASE. So have there really been any learnings around that IT can take back to HQ, back to their satellite offices?
Sure. Yeah, SASE has been a really interesting trend that we've been watching at IDC as well. And the way that I think about SASE is really shifting where that security is hosted, whether it's on premises or into the cloud. And we think about when you're using network-based security solutions and they're hosted in the cloud, that's how we think about the Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE. Mm-hmm. And I think remote work has really been a catalyst for thinking about some of these SASE type architectures, where you have remote workers who are going to be connecting directly into a cloud-based security platform, like a cloud access security broker or a secure web gateway. Mm-hmm. You have those remote workers connect directly into that cloud-based security platform, and then their traffic gets routed to wherever it needs to go, maybe a cloud-based application or a UC platform. And so that's different than if you have a security that's hosted in your data center or back to a corporate office. Mm-hmm. If you have to route that traffic from a remote worker back to a data center and then it's going to the cloud, that's just adding extra hops in there.
Totally.
Right? And so this idea of SASE is sort of shifting that security plane to be hosted in the cloud to be able to provide more direct connections for where the enterprise traffic needs to get to. And so we've seen SASE be a really important evolution in the market. We've seen it bundled with technologies like SD-WAN that allow organizations to be able to co-manage multiple connection types. So you can use broadband with cellular, for example, and have that traffic go directly to a SASE cloud-based security platform. So yeah, it's really interesting architectures that we're seeing that organizations are thinking about. From the pandemic, it sort of started this. Yeah. But some of these ideas are making sense for long-term plans as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I mean, being able to support remote workers is, certainly convenient and certainly in the best interest of security. But also, if you're looking to, if it's a great pull for talent because it is such a huge perk. So I would imagine that it's something that IT and the business in general wants to be investing in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you are looking to attract and retain talent into the future, then I think having options for being able to support remote workers is going to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. And so if that's a priority for your business, then the networking team should think about, what do I need to do from a networking perspective to ensure secure connectivity for those remote workers into the future?
Sure. And obviously we've been talking about networking quite a bit. And I believe earlier this year you introduced this concept, network as a service or networking as a service.
Yes.
And then it was certainly very much in its infancy, it seemed. And I think it's really easy to hype up a perhaps buzzy word. So I would like to maybe examine the hype, but also want to learn about, what is the status now and how does it tie in with the branch of one?
Sure. Yeah. So network as a service is a really interesting evolution that we've seen in the market in terms of how organizations can buy networking equipment that they're using either for remote workers or in their offices. And so if you think about it, it's sort of a subscription OpEx model for buying network infrastructure equipment, whether that be access points or switches or SD-WAN gateways and routers. Sort of the traditional way that this type of equipment has been bought is a capital expense. Or you buy it for a certain price, you hold on to it for 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. And then at the end of that life, you get rid of the equipment and you buy a new one. So this idea of network as a service is it's sort of taken from what we've seen in the cloud with infrastructure as a service and software as a service, where you sort of buy a subscription to these network infrastructure components. So if you need an access point to provide Wi-Fi in your office, for example, you can get that as a subscription. And you don't have to own that equipment. You don't have to maintain that equipment. The network as a service provider, the vendor, is going to do that day-to-day management for you. And so this can be really powerful for organizations, because if you think about what an IT team, what you want your IT resources to be focused on, do you want your IT resources to be focused on the day-to-day management of your Wi-Fi environment and making sure that, the 2.4 and 5 gig channels are optimized for each Wi-Fi access point? Or do you want to make sure that your IT team is focusing on things that are really important for your organization, figuring out a branch of one strategy, figuring out that the various lines of business within your organization, what they need from the IT department? And so this NAS model really allows organizations to be able to outsource, in a way, some of the day-to-day management of their network, which then frees up their IT teams to focus on more important things. And so you're right. We just saw NAS models really come about early this year and last year.
Sure.
And now we're starting to see some proof of concept trials being deployed for network as a service. We're starting to see some new models come about for how these models are going to be priced and what are the sort of metrics that are going to be used for paying for these network as a service models. So it's still a really interesting time. And we've seen a number of vendors come forward and offer these network as a service type models. Aruba, which is part of HPE with their GreenLake offering, is bringing this. Cisco made a big announcement called Cisco Plus that's focused on SD-WAN and SASE being delivered in an as-a-service model.
Okay.
So we expect that these as-a-service models are going to become increasingly important into next year, and we expect more organizations are going to be looking at them. It's
a really interesting point that you make, that it can be helpful for simplifying network management. And I think you do make a good point that it allows there to be more free time for IT if there's something perhaps more pressing.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of the idea of what's important for your IT team to be focusing on.
Sure.
And for some organizations, it may be optimizing that network for your use cases. But for other organizations, there may be an ability to outsource some of that day-to-day management to a NAS provider.
Okay.
Whether it be the OEM directly, the Cisco's, the Arubas of the world, or a telco provider maybe that you would be working with. There are a number of different providers that we're going to see offering these enterprise NAS models. And I think another key point for NAS is that it allows you to gain access to some of the cool new features that we see in enterprise networking today. There's a lot of talk about automation and ML and AI and applying those types of models to the network management. And that can be difficult for organizations to really apply in a hands-on way themselves. So a NAS model where you're able to outsource some of that day-to-day management to a provider, they're able to leverage some of these cool new automation techniques, being able to apply ML and AI technologies to managing that network. They may be in a better position to be able to implement some of that. So your organization gets the benefit of some of these cool new networking technologies without having to devote the resources within your IT team to be able to deploy them yourselves.
I would wonder though, what's sort of the protocol among vendors for upgrades? Like let's say, you tested it out and you're like, this is not really working for me. It doesn't meet my needs. How is it sort of an easy thing to pack it all up and send it away?
Sure. Yeah. And so this is going to be one of the things that we're going to see how these network as a service models do come about. For example, what is the upgrade cycle for it? Because one of the benefits of NAS could be that I want to be able to have access to the latest and greatest technology. We see Wi-Fi 6 and we see Wi-Fi 6E, for example, coming out early next year. So if I'm getting my network equipment as a service, then I want to have access to the latest technology that's coming out.
Yeah, of course.
And so, that's one of the benefits that these NAS models can bring, is that it can allow you to be able to upgrade to the latest infrastructure and the latest offerings from the NAS providers. And, that could work on the software side too. If you want to add, for example, like a location-based services to be able to do asset tracking or wayfinding through your Wi-Fi environment, that should be an easier thing than a long process for setting that up. I think one of the other ideas of NAS is that there's this centralized cloud-based platform where you can log in and say, I want to add location-based services to my environment. Okay. And then within a short amount of time, whether it be days or a couple weeks or maybe even hours in some cases, that feature is implemented within your organization. So it's sort of this cloud-like agility that we've seen from the public cloud, and looking to apply that to some of the networking environments that we've seen. That's sort of the promise, the future promise of what NAS could be. And again, we're in the early stages here, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this market continues to evolve.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, because it seems like there still needs to be a fair amount of education in the market and figuring out, and so enterprises actually know and can decide, is this right for me? But
yeah, absolutely.
It's still something that, it's requiring a little bit of hardware. So we got to move on to pretty much the $1 million question, which is all of these plans sound great. And perhaps if maybe one of these solutions sounds great for your enterprise, you might be thinking, oh yeah, I want to jump on that. But I'm sure you also know that there has been a lot of supply chain disruption, chip shortage, and I would certainly think, because it's been affecting everything, that the supply chain shortages and disruptions can really hinder these plans. So I guess I'm wondering, what does it look like right now? How are supply chain disruptions affecting the enterprising and networking plans?
Yeah, it's a really challenging environment, unfortunately, right now. And sort of the point of it is that organizations can't get access to the infrastructure that they're looking to deploy, right? Yeah. So if you want to deploy a new access point or a new switch or a new router, sometimes you can't get that. I mean, in the past, maybe there was a couple weeks or maybe a couple months that it would take to be able to, once you order it, having it actually deployed. Now those lead times are increasing to multiple months, 6 months, maybe up to a year. This is a challenge for organizations, and it's one that we've seen really develop over the last 6 months or so. And unfortunately, we're hearing from the networking vendors that this is going to remain into next year as well. And I know you've had some other experts at IDC on talking about the chip shortages, but it's not just chips; it's a number of different components, and it's not just in networking. We're seeing this in compute and storage as well. Even in industries outside of tech, we've seen this.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And so, from a networking perspective, so what we've encouraged folks to do is increase that communication with your vendor, right? If you have a need for a piece of equipment, a new access point, any sort of infrastructure, let your provider know that you need it, and they're really working as hard as they can to optimize their supply chains, to be able to use alternate components, to be able to get some of these infrastructure components out into the field as fast as possible. But I would say expect much longer wait times for a number of these components and the products that they're going to be built with into the future. I would expect that this is going to be remaining with us through likely the first half of next year and maybe even longer.
What sort of compromise, or I think compromise is the word that I'm looking for here, should IT be expecting to make certainly with their vendors, because there's going to be longer wait times, but also with their employees or with their executives who are expecting, XYZ? technology to roll out.
Yeah. Again, I think it's going to be important to have those conversations with your suppliers to make sure that they know what are the specific products that you need in a fast way. Because there's going to be, shortages among a number of products. And, some products are going to be, more quickly available than others. And that's going to depend vendor to vendor, what that looks like. And so I think it's going to be important for folks to just sort of extend that planning cycle for when they're expecting products that they need to be able to come into place, and when they could actually get access to them next year. So, we've seen a number of the markets that we track are growing quite nicely now. So it's not like there are not any products available. It's really that there's a disconnect between the number of products that have been ordered and the number that vendors are able to deliver right now. And so there's that sort of mismatch. I think it's just going to take a number of quarters to work itself out.
Sure. So communication is the name of the game. Just set your expectations accordingly, because it's going to be a wait.
I think so.
Well, that's great, Brandon. Thank you so much. I think that there's a lot of really good insights here, and certainly a lot of variety of networking technologies and frameworks, et cetera, that IT can deploy if it seems like it's the right fit for their enterprise. So thank you so much. I think a lot of good info. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me.
And also, thank you very much for the free plug about our chip shortage videos. I will link our most recent one in the description. It gives a really nice outline if you're looking to learn a little bit more about supply chain disruption and the chip shortage. So if you're watching this, you can also check out that video if that's something you're also interested in. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this episode of Today in Tech. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And you can also subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you're notified every single time we post a new video. If you have any questions or comments that we maybe didn't answer, please do let us know in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.